Do you use social media to market and promote your business? Well, guess what? Apple and Facebook are finally throwing down the hammer and forcing you to build your own audience. So, we're going to talk to you today about why and what you need to know to build your own audience right here, right now on Air Brands.
You are now tuned in to the On Air Brands podcast.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the On Air Brand Show. I am Todd Genetasio, along with my co-host Amber Furman. Amber, what's going on?
What's going on, Todd? I'm super excited for this topic. I feel like I just need a notepad and you're going to teach me all the things that I've been avoiding for the last few years.
Yeah. So what's a big piece of advice, not what we're talking about today, that maybe you've just ignored forever, that you're like, I need to start doing that, but I just am not gonna.
Oh my gosh. It's so crazy because I'm on this health kick and I just reached out to somebody because I have this issue where I got diagnosed with a thyroid issue and I was like, no, I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't need that. Right. And so I talked to somebody, said, I'm not going to go on medication. And they're like, that's cool. Then we can treat this holistically. You got to stop eating this and you got to stop eating this and you got to stop eating this. I'm like, shit, I'm not going to do that either. Right. And so it's like, we have all these things laid out in front of us that are like, this is the path, the exact path to where you want to go. And we end up saying, but I don't want to do that one. And I don't want to do that one. I'm okay with this one. So I'm going to do this. And then you're like, your shit doesn't work because I did it and it doesn't work, but you missed the first two steps. And it inevitably happens. If anybody has a coach, they know this conversation. I feel like I get the Coach E side of it at least once a week, where you read something that all of a sudden the advice you've been given makes sense. And you're like, oh, crap. Yeah. Now you got a message and be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And they're like, are you saying I'm right?
Yeah.
Maybe I should do this for a living, right? I feel like I think my coach has maybe I should do this for a living saved as an auto response to me.
That's great.
It's so funny.
Yeah. One of my coaches, he suggests actually he has a whole book recommendation list. And he'll recommend other people's podcasts or videos and stuff. And he's like, these are guys and gals that I like what they're saying. It aligns with what I'm talking about. But for some reason, maybe when they say it, it will click more for you than when I say it, or vice versa. So you can get as much valuable information from different perspectives and different voices as possible. And you're better off,
Yeah. And I mean, every parent out there knows this, right? How many times have you been telling your kids you need to do this, this, and this? Yep. And then they come home one day and they're like, I just heard the best thing ever. And they tell you what it is. And you're like, wait a minute. Haven't I been telling you that for 13 years?
Exactly. And something I've been telling people for 13 years is that you need to not build your business on rented land. Rented land is property that you do not own, such as Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or YouTube, right? These are great platforms that you can get out. You can meet your audience where they're consuming information, but you don't own it. And so when there is an algorithm change or there's a new rug pulled out from under you where now Facebook doesn't want to show all organic content all the time, so now you have to pay for ads. Or Apple, which is relatively recent news in the last couple of months, Apple comes out with new data privacy rules for their apps. And so now that's going to affect the way that the social media apps like Facebook and everything else are able to track data and help optimize businesses' advertising efforts. And so what all that means, without getting too technical, is that Apple is put up basically a privacy wall. That means they're asking everyone to opt in to be tracked by the apps that you use. And of course, when people see something that says, do you want this app tracking you? Yes or no? Everybody's going to click no. And that's going to impact the way that social media tools are able to, get your message out to the right people. So how can you avoid that stuff? And it's by having a direct relationship with your audience, which is called first party data. So it's having your own email list that you can communicate with, having people following you specifically and checking you out. And what Seth Godin often says is if you stopped putting out marketing content, would anyone care or notice? And if they do, that means they're going to go and look for you and find you, right? And so you have now protected yourself by creating a direct relationship with your audience and adding so much value that people are seeking you out if they haven't heard from you in a while. And that's what we got to get everybody doing.
Yeah, and I'm really excited for this topic. Something popped in my head though when you were talking. So for all of those who are sitting here going, but Facebook's just fine, Instagram's just fine, LinkedIn's just fine. I want to take this out of the marketing world for just a minute, or the digital marketing world. Have you seen the new movie, The Founder? I guess it came out a couple of years ago about McDonald's.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And like, I know that we've all heard the saying that McDonald's isn't in the burger business, they're in the real estate business.
Yep.
And then you watch this movie and you understand why. Like, McDonald's doesn't make money on what they sell, they make money on the land, right?
Yep.
Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, it's no different. They're making money on the land. That's all it is. And then your products are on that land, or you are the product on that land, one of the two, however you look at it. But if you need something outside of the digital world to look at, that's no different.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something I've always said, pre-algorithms and all that stuff, and knock on wood, like, we've always helped companies grow in a way that's like a holistic system. And so we're not putting all eggs in one basket, and we're also building our direct relationship with audiences, which is primarily through email lists. So one of the biggest mistakes that I actually made in my professional career, and I don't know if we've talked about this yet, but before I quit my corporate job, I had a drunk cooking show on YouTube.
Is this still available somewhere that I can?
If you go to easyguycooking.com, and you will see videos from me from 2009 and maybe 2010. Yep, that's they're still up. But long story short, we launched this like silly side project that ended up getting tens, possibly hundreds of thousands of visits to our website. We started making these silly videos, putting them up on YouTube, and then putting them on our blog. And we were at the top of Google for easy recipes. Like, if you searched easy recipes, we were at the top. Easy recipes for beginners, easy chicken parm recipes, easy meatloaf recipes, all these different things. We had like 12 or 15 different recipes, and we were at the top of Google. We're getting just tons and tons of traffic. Now, obviously, I didn't have business yet at the time. I didn't know about list building and building your audience, which is what we're talking about today. I was just like, wow, we're getting all these people to the site. This is super cool. And then eventually there's only so long that like a drunken side project for a 25-year-old kid works out. And so that went by the wayside, and, over the years, eventually the traffic died down and I never made anything out of it. And then eventually when I, got my entrepreneurial chops, and I was like, man, imagine if I would have built an email list from all that traffic I was getting to my website, because now I could just flip it back on. I could shoot them all a message and say, hey, what kind of recipes do you want to hear? Or what would you like? What do you need help with? But I never built a list. And so the list would have been a great asset for the business. But rather than doing that, we had all this search engine traffic and YouTube views, which is rented land. And when we stopped paying for that rent, with the heavy activity and all the, work that we were doing publishing content, once we stopped doing that, it went away. And I had nothing to show for it because we were on rented land. And so that's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, mistakes I've made as an entrepreneur. Luckily, it was before I was an entrepreneur, really. But man, I really wish we had an email list for that.
Me too, because I wish I was on it. It sounds like the best thing ever. It's really interesting too, because we've done a lot of conversations in the past few episodes about being intentional with your audience and building that rapport with them and having those conversations. Mm-hmm. And when you get to have full creative impact on what your audience sees, instead of posting something, and I mean, social media platforms are masters at grabbing attention. This mm-hmm. is why they're so good. So when you get to have your email list and say, okay, let's focus on this right now, and there's not all these other distractions that are taking them away, then you also get to make sure that they're seeing the message you want them to see and getting the feedback that you're talking about that you can't get otherwise.
Yeah. And so, Apple has put businesses in a position right now where you are, from a technical standpoint, kind of being forced to build your own first-party data, building your email list, building your own audience. But that's not really the reason why you should do it. It's really because relationships matter, and getting that direct communication and relationship with someone is really the key to getting long-term sustainable success for your business. And we were talking a little bit about this. We've mentioned it before, but relationships matter in business, and relationships take time to cultivate. And too many people are putting out great sales messages, but they're putting it out to strangers. And so no one's going to buy. And you're just grasping at straws. You're trying to catch lightning in a bottle with who can I get to buy today versus what relationships can we build over time that are going to create massive win-win-wins across the board for everyone involved. And we can keep going back to that well and grow together. And that's the difference and the power of having the audience. It has that compound effect of growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And, people think we're in this social media world where people think that because somebody likes or comments or shares your post that you're building a relationship with them. But how many times have you seen a post that really impacted you and then you wanted to share that with somebody and you're like, man, who posted that? Like, you're not building a relationship with the person. You're building a relationship with the content. So what if we could do both?
Yeah.
And I think that you have some really good tips for us on how we actually can do both if we're intentional.
Yeah. So one of the things everybody thinks like, oh, okay, so I need an email list. So that means I need to subscribe to my newsletter on the website, right? That's like the worst thing to do, because how many more newsletters do you want to subscribe to, right? There's really no value in just a one line, subscribe to my newsletter, get on my list so I can send you emails. You need to really give value. You need to give a value proposition for why someone should give you their email address. And we use what's called lead magnets. It's like some kind of free digital value, whether that's a PDF or a video or an email series or some kind of value that we can deliver at scale with very low cost. And that's something that someone enters their email address for. If you want to see an example and also get super practical help on what we're talking about today, I did put together a free training on how to quickly and easily get started building your audience. That's at thegrowthsuite.com/build your audience. So that's an example of a lead magnet and something you should have, but it's something of practical value that someone would want to sign up for, right? So that's what you need to have versus just subscribe to my newsletter, right? And
so quick question for you on that. So somebody signs up for this. Do you then send them another email that says, hey, do you also want the newsletter? Or does that lead magnet give you authority and permission to then just start sending them that?
So legally, it's different in different areas. So in Europe, you cannot send emails other than whatever they signed up for. In California, I think that's also the case. Across the country, it is not a national United States law at this point. I'm sure it's just a matter of time. But the way that we kind of go around that, or not get around it, but just be transparent about it, is in the text on your page, say, enter your email address to sign up for this free training and also receive weekly tips and bonuses and blah, blah, blah about how you can grow your audience and grow your business, right? So putting that kind of language together is, so you kind of group them together. So it's like, if you're signing up for this, you're signing up for the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah, I love that, because there's nothing worse than somebody saying, hey, give me your email address. Let's schedule a connection call and get to know each other. And then all of a sudden, because you jumped on a connection call with this person, you're getting a newsletter 4 times a day. Yeah. So that's really good advice. Yeah.
And I think though, it's what we talk about every week. Everything's about communication and framing and how you position things, because when this first, when the law in Europe came out, it's called GDPR. So everybody put like this little checkbox. So it would be like, sign up to get your free training, and then like check this box so that we can send you our newsletter. And now there's creates conflict there, because it's like, well, I want this training, I don't want the newsletter. But if you say sign up to get this free training on how to build your audience, and you'll also receive additional information and content from us when we send it out about how to grow your business and audience, right? So it's just a matter of like language and positioning to add value. But of course, you have to be adding value to be able to position it as value.
Yes, absolutely. And it has to be valuable to your clientele.
Yeah.
And you can only find out what's valuable to your clientele if you ask them through the newsletter that you're going to create, right?
Right. Yep. Exactly. And so, one of the things I think that holds people back is that they maybe either one are overwhelmed with the idea of like building an email list. But honestly, it really is not that much work. And in the free training, you'll see how simple it is. And the great thing about like creating something like this is it's one-time work. So if people think like, oh, I need to grow my email list and I have to do this all the time. It's like, no, you come up with one great free offer that's relevant to the stuff you talk about. And now every time you have every time you publish an episode or when you're publishing content, you can add value in your content and then reference back to it and say, hey, if this little bit of content was good for you, click here and sign up to get more great free content, right? So you create these breadcrumbs for people to enter into your world, and you just consistently promote that same thing.
Yeah. So for all of you who are now seeing the dots start to connect, you have this amazing podcast out there. You have this YouTube channel. You have this content creation source, and you're not getting the views that you want. You're not getting the downloads that you want. When you get to take a quote or an interview or some piece of information from your podcast, send that out to somebody in this amazing newsletter that Todd's helping you create and say, if you liked this, here's the RSS feed for the podcast, or here's the website for the podcast. Like, are you starting to see how this all connects?
Yeah. And think about like you said, how many times do you see a piece of content and you're like, oh, you remember it later and you want to go back and share it with someone. So that stuff sticks, but you forget about it. So how many people, if you're just sharing on social, if you're just sharing your main content onto social, how many people see it once in a while and really like it and want to see it all the time, but they don't, because that's just the nature of how the algorithm works. And so if you say, hey, if you like this, sign up, now that person can, proactively give you permission to start reminding them every week, like when your episodes are out, they don't want to miss it, but you didn't give them the opportunity to sign up, right? So that's another thing, is like, you want to be able to serve people who want to be served.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know newsletters used to be the way that it was done, and then social media came out. Do you think that I can't talk today, newsletters have diminished with the increase of social media usage, or is that just the perception?
I think it's just the perception. I think, well, number one, email statistics are pretty much standard. Like they haven't crashed and they haven't grown. And so it's been the main consistent channel where social media reach has consistently gone down and down and down pretty dramatically if you're not running ads. And in the last year or two, there's also been this resurgence in email newsletters as a business model, where like if you look at something like The Skim or Morning Brew is like a financial thing. They send it out every day. The Skim is like this, like the millennial female's view on news topics or something. I'm not the demographic. I don't get it, but but it's that type of stuff where these businesses are built on newsletters where that's their audience is signing up because they want this perspective and this insight from them on a regular basis. And so there's all kinds of new businesses popping up that are like that are super successful. One of them is called The Hustle, which HubSpot just bought for like $10 million or tens of millions of dollars. But it's that they bought the asset, which was the audience, right? Like, this was a newsletter that has a huge audience of subscribers, and HubSpot wanted to just buy into that. So, besides wanting to reach your people, again, it's the asset for your business. Having the audience for your business is something that actually increases the value of your company.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when we start thinking about, this conversation in the podcasting world or the content creation world is, how do you make money on your podcast? Well, one of the first things that people are going to want to know is, how do you promote your show? How many people subscribe to that promotion? How many downloads do you get a month? And you can take those numbers and say, hey, like, these downloads might not be what you're looking for, but look at my email list. Like, it's just, like you said, it's equity. It's just giving you these, and then you get to test things out and you get to make it fun. So for people who are saying, all right, but I know that you said that I don't have to do this every week. Like, I know that you said it's not a lot of work, but I see these new newsletters come out and they're always different. And it looks like they put a ton of time into it. Like, how much time do you really think it takes to do a newsletter well, week to week?
So there's a lot of different ways to do email marketing. My perspective is that your emails should come from you or from a person, right? Like, the emails that come from Tresnick Media and Growth Suite come from Todd.Genetasio@TresnickMedia.com. They say Todd Genetasio in the name. They're coming from me. And when I send an email out, it takes me about sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 35 minutes, but it doesn't take me long because I am communicating one-on-one with someone. And so the same amount of time it would take me if I said, oh, I want to send an email to Amber and give her some tips on like, oh, this Facebook Apple news just came out. I need to email Amber and tell her that she needs to prioritize her email list. Let me just whip that email up. That's not going to take long when you think about sending a message to one person. And so I just happen to be doing that and then sending it to thousands of people who are subscribed to my email list. So there's no design, there's no layout, there's no HTML, there's nothing in those types of emails. And so that's what I always recommend for two reasons. One, the sake of speed, but two, the sake of relationship. Are people going to build a relationship with no reply at yourcompany.com and some stock photos and fancy design? No. And they're also going to know that looks like a commercial, and people are trained to ignore commercials. But if they get an email from Amber and it looks like an email that Amber sent them personally that says like, hey, Todd, I know you're super interested in your personal development and reading. I'm thinking about launching a book club where we get together regularly to implement what we're learning in these specific books. Would you be interested in that? I'm much more likely, one, to open it because it came from you as a person. And number two, I'm much more likely to actually read and respond to it because it looks like it came from a person, because it really did come from a person, right? And by the way, if you are interested in that kind of book club, Amber's thinking about it. So if you think it's a good idea, hit her up and let her know.
Thanks for that.
But that's the approach I take to email marketing. Is I use it for building relationships at scale and just communicating with people. So it's like, it's no additional time than if I were sending an email to one person that I was going to send an email to anyway.
It's really interesting because I think that what you just said just completely busts so many myths about what a newsletter needs to look like. What should your newsletter look like? What should it be? But what's going through my head as you talk is this idea in between a intention and an objective. I remember when I first entered this space and I was reaching out to people for the purposes of connecting and also for the purposes of finding out, how we could be of service to each other. I got caught up in that. And somebody once told me that like your intention always has to be the of service and to provide value. And then you have your objective with each question and each conversation that you ask. And I feel like this is exactly what you're talking about in this newsletter. Like every newsletter, your intention has to be value-based or else they're never going to open it again. But you can have these objectives within that can be extremely helpful to you and to the other person. Yeah.
And we've said it before, and I'll continue to say it, is that the best marketing messages are timely, relevant, and practical. And if you're building a generic newsletter, if you say subscribe to my newsletter because I send emails every week, you don't know what specifically people are interested in. But if you have a lead magnet that references a specific problem or outcome, like if you go and sign up for thegrowthsuite.com/build your audience, I know you're interested in building your audience. And now I can send you messages based on knowing what's timely, relevant, and practical for you. And so that's the other part of like needing lead magnets versus like subscribe to the newsletter. Now we know what's on someone's mind so that we can communicate with them in a way that's more valuable for them, right? Because we can send out value, but it might not be received. So we want to send value that's going to be received. And when you have the ability through lead magnet signups to know what they want and need, what they're trying to accomplish, then you can send timely, relevant, and practical messages to those people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so valuable. Instead of just saying, here's a newsletter and then rotating the message, if you're able to actually, which if you have the right systems and the right CRM, you are able to actually send a message to people who are interested in that particular lead magnet. Like it's a game changer. So for this topic of really getting this firsthand knowledge, this firsthand information, getting this off of social media platforms, what do you think the big gap is in between people saying, okay, yes, I know I've been hearing this for the last 15 years. And I know you're telling me that now it's even going to be harder.
Yeah.
But like, what's after that? What's the but?
Yeah. Well, I mean, most of the time what happens is someone who, I mean, one, it's just, it's another item on the checklist and they don't want to do it. Right. And that's just a mental hurdle that people need to get over. But I think another thing that happens is when you do something for the first time, a couple things. One, you're not going to be very good at it because you've never done it before, right?
Yes.
And number two, things take time. Like we said, this is about relationships. They talk about the money is in the list. That's like an old internet marketing phrase that people would live by. But the money is not in the list. The money is in the relationship that you have with the people on your list. And so in order to build that relationship and then create you give value to them, you're putting equity in that relationship that you can then draw upon later when you send them offers and get sales, right? That comes from consistent value giving. And when you take that approach, like you said, when that's your intention and it's a long game, like we've said on previous episodes, where you need a customer journey. You can't try to sell to strangers because 80% of your sales are going to come from people 90 days after they engage with you. And it takes like 4 to 18 months for someone to actually enter into a buying cycle from when they interact with your brand. And so now what you're doing by building that list is then that gives you the time trigger that the next 90 days, 6 months, 18 months, whatever, that you need to be communicating with people and taking time to build that relationship so that they will buy from you. And the biggest thing that I see people dropping off is that they send one email to a very small list. They don't get any sales, and they say this email marketing thing doesn't work, right? But
you might as well just say my name, Todd. It's okay.
But once you get people sticking to it, right? Like we have a client that's they're a SMB business, in the 8-figure range, but we have an email list that's grown over the course of like 8 years or something to like 15,000 people. We publish a blog post every week. We send an email every week with a link over to the blog post. And then every once in a while, because now look, we're adding value every week by sending, and like I said, super simple. It's like, hey, Amber, like, there's new HR compliance stuff you need to be aware of. We just published an article on the blog. Click here to check it out. It's all very, very relevant. And then every once in a while, we send an email that says, hey, Amber, are you struggling with like the HR issues that with these new laws that just passed? A lot of our clients are. We have a couple bullet points that'll help. Hit reply and let's chat and we can help you out. And then you get hundreds of responses because you've been building your list consistently and you've been putting value into the equity bank consistently. And that's a big number. We have another client who just is owner operator of a carpet cleaning company. And I'm super proud of this guy because he is like, he's not on the computer ever, right? Like he's a carpet cleaner. He's not a tech savvy person, but he really has committed himself to helping build his business more. And he did the same thing. He enrolled in our program. He goes through and he's like, okay, great. I need to send some emails. So he sends 1 or 2 emails or something and fades out. And he comes on to one of the coaching calls and he says, hey, we're stuck. We need, what can we do to drum up some business? I said, well, how often have you been emailing your subscribers? He said, I did it a couple of times, but it didn't work. I'm like, well, here's the problem. If you haven't emailed these people in a couple of months and then you email them and say, hey, buy from me, that's like pretty spammy. But if you just stay consistent, help them solve their problems, remind them what it is that you do, and then every once in a while prompt them for an offer. So he got consistent, and just in a few weeks of being consistent, he started getting a response. So he got he has a couple hundred people on his email list, and he's sending out carpet cleaning tips every week. And then he sends out an email and says, hey, we're running a promo this month. Would you, if you want to get your carpet clean, let me know. He got a couple people to reply. A couple of those people referred him to their neighbors. So now it took a couple of weeks to get traction, but we're talking about a couple of weeks and a couple hundred people. Like in the grand scheme of things, this is a very small operation, and he's starting to see results very quickly. So the power is in that list for every business. It's just a matter of create relationships, put value into those relationships, and then ask them if they need help solving their problems in a way that you know your worth and value.
I love it. And one of the things if you guys listened to the PodMax show, which you should have, if you didn't, you should go listen to it. And I said, I love it. And I've got the McDonald's theme going through my head. So thanks, Larry. I appreciate that. You had talked about this amazing, process, I guess, that you use in a prior episode where somebody asks you a question and you say, oh, if one person has this question, then a bunch of people might. And we talked about this newsletter situation back then. Yep. So my question is for the people who are thinking, okay, consistency is key. It always has to go out on a Friday, but it's in my mind now. Like, is there too often to email your audience? And is there a need to have it be done at the same time and same week or same day every week?
So there's a couple answers to this. Everyone's different, but the truth is taking action is what makes a difference. So do the best you can with what you have, period. Don't make an excuse. If you hear what I'm about to say and you're like, oh, well, I can't do it that way, then I'm not going to do it at all. No, take some kind of action. A little bit of action is better than no action at all, always. And So is it good to have a consistent schedule where it goes out every week at the same time? Yes. Is there too much? It depends on the audience and the business. The old saying is, as long as you have value to send someone, you should send it. There's people who, a lot of businesses send an email every single day. Most companies, one, don't have the resources to do something like that, and two, are not comfortable with it. But I do recommend at least once a week if you can. The way that I kind of do it is, and I'm a small business. It's just me and a couple team members, so I don't have a lot of huge resources. What I do is I try to send one at least once a week, and on weeks where I got more to say, I send more. So that's where I try and be consistent. And that's also the power of like when we have the show, is that I always have something I can email them about that's got great free content, right? So when we talk about like simplicity of process, if you have a show every week that you're publishing, we're talking today about this audience thing. We're going to get off of this episode. Once we get it published across the platforms, I'll pop open, active campaign. I'll hit create new campaign, subject line. You need to build your audience now, and here's why. Hey, first name. Do you know that there's different technical things limiting your social media reach and your ability to market your business through social media? We talk about it all today, all on this episode of the On Air Brand Show. Would love for you to listen and let me know what you think. And if you have other questions, let me know so we can put them into future episodes. Here's a link. You can listen on Apple, Spotify, blah, blah, blah. Talk to you later. Todd, boom. I spoke that in like 30 seconds. It's going to take me 3 minutes to write it, but it doesn't take a lot of effort to do it regularly. And it's just a matter of when you have value to send out, send it out.
I love it. So when you're thinking about, you said something really important just a minute ago that, there's this all or nothing program that runs in a lot of people's minds. That's like, okay, somebody said I had to do it this way, so I have to do it this way. And then somebody else is going to say something, and that person that has that all or nothing program, and just so you know, I only know this because that person was me for so long. You hear somebody else say something and you're like, well, Todd must have been wrong, right? Because this person says this, or this person must be wrong because Todd says this. And so the real key to this is like, find out what works for you. Like, take little pieces, try stuff around. Like you said, do something every single week, because your audience, like the people out there in every industry that say, if you're not doing it this way, you're doing it wrong. If you're not doing it this way, it's not going to work. Those people are all full of shit. Right. So like you do something, right? Yeah. So for that person that's saying, okay, we want to get people on an email list, are you saying that social media has no place in this now?
No, absolutely not. I think social media is a great place to be able to reach your audience where they're at, right? Like if you put up a sign up page on your website for your lead magnet, that doesn't mean you have an email list. You have to now, get people to go over there. So, having direct communication with them through your email list is your top priority, but you have to go meet them where they're at. They are out consuming content on social media. That actually brings up another good point about the reason for an email list through a lead magnet is when you go to the supermarket, you have an intention of buying stuff. And so you might see something new on the shelf and you're in the mentality of, I'm here shopping, I will buy this and test it out. When you're on the internet, unless you're on Amazon, you do not have the sole intention of buying something right now. You're looking through content. And to take someone from Facebook and say, hey, I know you're here looking for like fun entertainment or inspiration, but click over here to buy my stuff. It's not congruent with what they're trying to do at the moment. But when you can align yourself with what they are trying to do, you'd be like, hey, you're on Facebook right now because you're scrolling through looking for content, inspiration, help, education. I have more of that over here. Step into my booth and let me show you what's going on. And then they can click over to your website, sign up, and now they're still aligned with the journey they were on. They were looking for content. They got more content. And now you have the relationship, the stepping stones, the breadcrumbs to now nurture that relationship and then present them with sales offers when it makes sense, as opposed to trying to jam the square peg into the round hole of you're looking for content, but I want to sell a product. So here's my product.
Yeah. It's so funny because, we are the easiest person to lie to. And so there's so many people out there that are doing exactly that. And yet when somebody lays out your problem and your actions in such blatant terms that you're like, of course I wouldn't do that. Like, that's freaking ridiculous. Who goes to Facebook and says, I know you're here for inspiration, motivation, and entertainment, but buy my stuff? Nobody would ever do that. Oh, wait. And then all of a sudden you're like, crap. So I think it's really interesting when you say it like that, because there are a lot of people listening to this that are like, I didn't realize, number one, that's what I was doing. And number two, I didn't realize that wasn't the right way to do it. So this is why I was so excited for this episode, because we get in these habits. We just start acting like everybody else is doing it. So that must be what I'm supposed to do too.
Right.
And now you're giving some intentional tips for how you can make that happen.
And like you've said before, is like when you're modeling someone else, like you might see someone else doing it and you know that that person's successful and you know that they're doing this, but you don't know what order and sequence and context that action is for their business. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and you don't know what else is layered in on top and behind that kind of thing. And so just copying someone without doing the proper research or understanding the context of it is going to, that's when you swing and miss. And then you start judging yourself and you're like, oh, they did it and I couldn't make it work and blah, blah, blah. And then that just makes us less likely to take action. But success loves speed and action creates clarity. So just start doing it. I would challenge everybody here that's listening and watching. If you have even one email subscriber, send an email today. When you hear this episode, send an email to however many subscribers you have, just super simple, and ask them, if you haven't emailed them in a while, say, hey, I'm looking to get my emails going again. What would you be interested in hearing about? Let's send that out. I would love to get everybody to start communicating with your audience more. And if you don't have an email list yet, then you got to start thinking about how to do that. And if you like the stuff we talked about today, if you want to learn how to come up with the right kind of lead magnet that's going to give value first and get people interested in signing up, and how you promote that lead magnet to build your list, go to thegrowthsuite.com/build your audience, and you can get the free training there. I practice what I preach, so you will get tons of value just in that free training, I promise.
Yeah. And if you're wondering, like, does one really make a difference? I can tell you that just piecing together little dots from the last few episodes, Todd made a post a few weeks ago about how often do you send out to your newsletter? And I did this post where it was a meme of like hiding under a blanket, because I was like, what newsletter? And then his post made me realize that what newsletter is not an appropriate entrepreneurial response to profit. So I started my newsletter again, and we were talking today, and he says, I saw your email come through, and I thought, yeah, I finally kicked Amber in the ass. Like, she's going. And my thought was, oh my gosh, somebody did read it, right? Because when you start posting content, when you start creating things, the first thing that goes through your head is anybody even going to read this?
Yeah.
And if you have in your mind that 1 is greater than 0, if you have in your mind that one person is all it takes, and then that makes your content worth it, if you've got even just 10, 15 people on your email list, like that one person then grows and grows and grows. So just proof that this works and one person matters. And Todd, thanks for being my one person.
Happy to. I'm sure I wasn't the only one, but I'm glad I'm the one who told you about it today. But so just to recap, from a technical perspective, it's super important that you start building your own audience and you stop building your business on rented land. And the best way to do that is by building an email list and by setting up a lead magnet that gives value to your audience first, so that they can give you permission to follow up with them and add more value, so that you can build a relationship. Because like I said, the money's not in the list. The money is in the relationship you have with the people on your list. So use your email list to build a relationship and add value, and then prompt people to find out when they want to solve those problems that you can help them with your products and services.
So valuable. And as always, remember, guys, that thegrowthsuite.com/build your audience is where you can find that resource. I know it is exactly where I'm going after we get done here, because I'm sure that it's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, thank you very much. And if you want to get better at creating your habits and your mindset, morethancorporate.com is Amber's site with her great podcast and show that talks about all that kind of awesome stuff. And we would love for you guys, if you found value in this, if you could make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcast platform and share it with a friend who you know needs to be building their email list as well. So thanks, guys, for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Tuned in to the On Air Brands podcast.